Welcome, everyone, to another exciting episode of the None of Our Businesses YouTube show and podcast, where we talk about this week's news in business, taxes, accounting, any and all of the above. This week, mostly just business. And we do all that talking from the perspective of accountants, 3 accountants, myself, Ty Carr, and with me today is Jack DiMatteo and Charlie Zygmunt.
Thanks for joining us.
All right, well, what are we talking about today? Well, in-person jobs, the listings are down. I said before, this seems like a game of chicken between employers and labor. What's going on here? What's gonna go on here? And short on microchips, car manufacturing is slowing down, production is slowing down. What can that mean? Unemployment benefits are ending, but there are people who are still owed back benefits. So maybe some people are going to get a big paycheck all at once here. And Reddit, the popular or maybe not so well-known or well-known posting board online is trying to go public. Finally, lumber prices are dropping and Ty is working on his hoarding plan for garden projects. All right, guys, let's get into it. We'll kick it off with Jack.
Okay, yeah, first article this week comes to us from the Wall Street Journal. And it talks about job postings starting to level off, not so much for the remote jobs, but the in-person jobs. The demand is not really there. Servers at restaurants, I mean, I guess there's the fear factor is getting back to the point where not as many people are going out, dining out. For whatever reason, there's many people that, that's leveling off. There's no need for these people in these live roles, if you will. I'm not really surprised in that. I think we're going to see some other shifts. We're going to talk about some other things later in the show, which I think are impacting the job market one way or the other. Something I said just as we were coming online, it's not in this article, but I saw another article and heard a story about how, now the fact that, these remote jobs are in such demand. Some of the big tech companies also, this ties back to COVID. The latest thing coming out of big tech is they've kind of killed all their plans of going back in the office. So a lot of workers are now where they can't afford to live, in Silicon Valley in the shadow of these buildings. They're moving to the Midwest where housing is more affordable and finding a way to buy a house for the first time and raise families. So again, I mean, we look at these articles and they seem to pop up at least one a week, but reading more, I'm kind of relating a few other things to this article, but wanted to see what take you guys have on this. It seems like we're just, every time we get in here, we're talking about how this remote workforce is really starting to change now literally the way people live.
Yeah, well, I mean, it seems like a double whammy because, as a restaurant, you lay everybody off because of this pending pandemic and whatnot. And then, of course, because everybody's laid off, nobody's coming in. And so that then further seals your decision to have laid people off. And I'm not saying this is something universal that everybody goes through, but I can definitely see how a lot of businesses would have this kind of cyclical effect going on. And I think it just is another good reminder of something I learned a long time ago, which is to kind of just think about what your market is. If your service that you sell is only good to the people who are nearby you, then you have a pretty limited range of people you can help. But if what you do happens to be something that can be used universally, then the scope of people you can sell that service to is proportional to the size of that market. And so I think we see this all the time in professions that don't lend themselves well to really a computer. I hate to say computer because it doesn't have to be that, but I think so often that becomes the driving factor. If what you do is done through a computer, then it's a better candidate for being done remotely. And so, yeah, I think it's just a reordering of the economy and a change in how services get rendered. And I think that, the sooner everybody, including the employees and the employers, kind of come to terms with that and start selling services that lend themselves well to that medium, I think that's what we all kind of have to do. And we've said it on the podcast before, but the pandemic has just been the great accelerator of that. And so I think this is another example of that happening. What do you think, Ty?
Yeah, I think it was a different episode where I made the comment that it felt like labor and employers were playing a game of chicken. And I think with the in-person work, I think particularly like the restaurants, I know around here, like restaurants, a lot of the places that I like to go, they're closing. They're not opening extended hours, and it's not just for the safety from a virus kind of thing. It is they literally don't have the labor to stay open all of the hours. They're closing on some days, or they're just they're closing early at nights and things like that. And yeah, this does feel like that continuing game of chicken. And what I mean by that is it's kind of they're staring each other down, in the sense that, as things were opening up, we saw restaurants and things saying, and many employers saying, hey, we can't find enough people to work. And that seemed to still be the case. And I made the comment back then that all these folks, who are sitting on the sidelines not working, it's kind of like a game of chicken, because they're saying, well, we're not getting paid enough, or the working conditions aren't good enough, or whatever that is. And we've got unemployment benefits in place. So it's not worth it for us to go back to work. But if it wasn't worth it not being worth it to go back to work, causes the employers to kind of, like you said, pivot and think about like other ways to run their business, or other markets to be serving, or how they might do something different. And so now I think we're seeing the other side of it. Now, we might be seeing a situation where employers are kind of saying, yeah, okay, well, maybe we don't need you after all. Maybe we've got a way to operate our businesses, or other things to do that don't require as much of a head count. And so, it'll be interesting to see where that goes. I guess, just my local, like as of sharing the local anecdotes of my observations, I think probably we still do need more people working in the labor market to meet the actual demand that's there. So I think it might go back the other way, and maybe this is just a function of things being more shut down. And I'm not sure. I'm wandering here because I'm not sure, but I wouldn't say anyone should be ready to call it that, oh, this is it, right? That now employers have decided they don't need people. And so now the job market's coming to equilibrium. I don't think it's coming to equilibrium. I think we're going to see more back and forth on this to come.
Yeah, that's a great point, Ty. That's kind of the way I see this whole thing. I mean, we've just got manipulation and overstimulation, a lot of things, and we've talked about it in the stock market multiple times with the quantitative easing and the printing of money, and even in this case too, I don't think we really even know where the labor market is. And an article later on in this podcast that we're going to talk about, we're going to be able to address that. But I think you're absolutely right. We have to get some of these once in a lifetime factors, extenuating outside influences, and get that cleared up to find out what the status of the labor market really is. Charlie, what do you have for us this week?
Well, I think that's a perfect lead in, because speaking of extenuating circumstances, there's an article in Sky News called "General Motors Halts Production at 8 North American Factories Due to Chip Shortage." And so, of course, you're thinking about making a car, you're always thinking of these, big mechanical parts. But one thing all cars nowadays have is a semiconductor that's a part of it. And if it doesn't have that, then guess what? It doesn't get made. And if you don't have them, your entire factory full of all those other things gets shut down. And that's what they're finding. General Motors is not the only one that has been hit by this problem. Ford also is having troubles getting its semiconductors. And so they said that August sales dropped 33% because of this. They're trying to use the time to repair and ship unfinished vehicles. So they're trying to make better use of that spare capacity that they have. But I just think it's really interesting from a couple of perspectives. I think it's interesting as like a pricing issue of how do these companies set up these factories and have an idea of how much it costs to make a vehicle, when that cost can be really dynamic as the market throws them curveballs, like having to shut it down. And so I'm just kind of thinking about that. And then I guess more generally, I just want to think about if you guys have any advice for any businesses that are currently facing supply chain issues, because of course this is focused on semiconductors, but I think that's a theme that we're seeing across all markets and across all types of products, that there's different supply chain issues. And so, yeah, just any advice to operators facing those challenges.
Well, the thing where I think is interesting, I've had a couple discussions today, and forever we've seen manufacturing decline it's steadily forever in this country. And I think with this pandemic, I think all of a sudden people are realizing, oh, wait a minute, 90% of our medical supplies are manufactured in China. What are we going to do? Some of these other shortages, I just heard something on semiconductors, the same thing. All of those things are offshore. And so now I'm hearing these manufacturing companies. I talked to two owners in the last 2 days. Same story. All of a sudden, they're seeing that trend turn around and go in the other direction because people are starting to realize, finally, for the first time, that we really need to start manufacturing things in this country. So I'm not sure what to tell people right now who are caught short in the supply chain, but I think manufacturing has been looked down upon or been in decline for a number of years. But my advice to anybody would be, if you're looking to get into a trade, if you're looking to maybe buy and own a business, I'm thinking that manufacturing in this country is going to pick up. And if you get yourself in a position where you have the type of capacity to turn things out and satisfy clients, at some point, the supply chain thing is going to work itself out. Not sure. I'm not smart enough to know when that's going to be, but I think as we mitigate the reliance on so much offshoring, which we have in the past several years, and start bringing those things back onshore, I think you'll start to see some of these supply chain, these extremes in the supply chains. They're also going to level out.
Yeah, I think that the way Jack approached it, and thinking about the people who maybe might start looking for other careers outside of manufacturing, I think that hits right on the head. The people who suffer from who most obviously suffer from this situation are the ones who have a reduction to hours or potentially lose jobs because there's less manufacturing. It's not clear from I would point out, it's not clear that the actual operator or owner of a business or the corporation, in the case of a car manufacturer, is the one actually losing out necessarily. If in a situation where, and here's my thought on this point, is that in a situation where a supply shortage is industry wide, right? Nobody has a competitive advantage to having the supply, then, and the demand is still there, right? Then it's created a situation, it causes the market price of your product to go up, right? So from a production standpoint, from a corporate standpoint, what you're saying now is that the average market value of your product is higher because there's more demand and the supply of that product is low. So you would think, all things being equal, just the market price of that product goes up, and that means you can earn a higher profit per product that you sell, and the cost of you reducing, you're earning more profit at a reduced cost because you're not having to throughput as many products, right? So it depends, of course, on the amount of fixed costs that you have that you were trying to spread out over your throughput. But if your fixed costs are nominal compared to the variable cost of the materials and the labor and everything that goes into it, then some of the companies might actually be winning in this scenario from a corporate profit standpoint, because they have less variable cost throughput to get to their profit targets, or even higher than their initial profit targets, just because the market value of their product is so high in an environment where everybody in their industry has a limit on the supply, right? And typically, what in most in your everyday markets that are like that, they end up getting regulated, right? That's what happens with markets where there is a natural unlimited demand, or a high demand and a limited supply. The government gets in and regulates it, right? So I just point that out, that I'm not suggesting regulation is necessarily coming on these industries. I'm just pointing out that it's really kind of a good deal from the company. It could be. I don't know the math. I don't know the numbers of the fixed versus the variable cost enough to say for sure, but I think it could be a fairly good deal for some of these companies that they actually are industry wide, have limited supply. And so then it's like, well, who does lose here? Well, the reason it could be a good deal for the companies is, like I said earlier, if they can cut their variable costs, if they can cut the throughput of their variable costs and still get the same or higher profits, that's how these companies are winning in this environment. But what variable cost are they cutting? They're cutting people. right? And so that's the thing is that there's, and this goes back to Jack's comments about, well, the manufacturing industry may not be a good industry to work in from an employee standpoint at this point, because they are the variable cost that is not necessary for a company to reach their profits in this environment. And so their jobs are on the line, or they're subject to volatility and things like that. So that's what I'm seeing in the stars, and when I'm looking at the cloudy mix, that's what I'm seeing kind of pop out at me as an image of what could be happening here, not by design, but just by what could happen to the various players involved.
No, that makes sense. And yeah, if it's a universal thing that all companies are going through, that they're going to all be experiencing those same challenges. So no, that makes a lot of sense. And I could see how that would apply to a lot of different auto manufacturers. So just, speaking of those challenges, I know you've got another article we can talk about, Jack, about the economy.
Yeah, I mean, maybe we should call this the labor podcast, because it seems like a lot of these things are involved around labor and job openings and pricing. And this next article is exactly like that. So we had a major event happen last week, and that we've been, hearing murmurs about for a long time. And it's finally the ending of the extended unemployment benefits. I know some states have already gone and done this, but now it's officially, even at the federal level, all the extended over and above unemployment benefits have come to an end. But what was kind of interesting in this article is, it's like getting hit with a double whammy, because there's people that have been waiting that haven't been paid, regardless of the fact that they're getting higher benefits. I guess a lot of these states have such a backlog that people are owed thousands and thousands of dollars. So I guess at that point, it doesn't really matter if it's extra unemployment money or any unemployment money, because unfortunately for these people, they're not getting anything. So they're kind of hit with a double whammy. Now, the other obvious, going back to the first article we talked about, how is this? People have been arguing back and forth forever. The fact that people are getting these unemployment benefits, is that why people aren't taking these jobs? Well, I guess we're about to find out, because now with these unemployment benefits having ended, will some of these job openings start being filled? Will we start seeing restaurants, opening at capacity again? There's a couple of different ways to look at this. What do you guys think on this article?
Yeah, I mean, I think it'll be exciting to see things kind of opening back up and see how that changes things. I do think that them pulling the unemployment benefits is, like you said, going to cause a huge influx of people who were previously what we'll call discouraged. We'll say people who were unemployed and maybe not looking as hard for work as they could have been, maybe will, now that that has ended. I don't think it's a good thing, because I think that no one was winning in that case. Anybody who wasn't working was unemployed and was not having a good time. And I realize that. So I don't think that it's necessarily a good thing that it's ending, but I do think that from the standpoint of just how easy will it be to fill a job as an employer post that benefit being taken away, will be noticeably easier. And I do think it like we talked about earlier, it's a little bit of one of those self-fulfilling prophecies. If everybody is not working, then no one is there to be the customer either, because they're not working. And so as we get rid of the unemployment benefits, drives people back to work, hopefully drives spending, which then leads back to the ability to have those same employees that we're talking about. And so I'm hopeful that that's how it plays out, but of course, only time will tell. What do you think, Ty?
Yeah, I'm going to leave the macro analysis where you guys left it there, and I'm going to think about something very micro on this, which is if you're one of these, I don't know how this works, and it's interesting to me. Like if you're one of these people who should have qualified for benefits, should have been getting the benefits, but for whatever reason they weren't flowing to you, so there's this presumed obligation to pay you these back benefits, right? Is that how it works? And if that is how it works, then is it you've survived to date, right? And then let's suppose you now get a job and you're doing okay now, but you still have there's this obligation to pay you the back benefits from when you were just kind of barely surviving. Is that a scenario? Can that happen? Somebody can really feel like they got a windfall now just by, I guess it feels like a windfall, but in all fairness, it's not. They're getting it because they eked they barely survived during a period where they should have been getting benefits.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. I've seen pictures on the internet of like they'll show the unemployment letters laid out and they'll have like 18 of them because they still send the weeks when they get behind. They don't wait and send it all together. What they do, they'll send each week that they were behind, but they'll send that whole batch as a batch. So you'll get 30 envelopes. And then even when you get denied, if they mess up, this is what I found on the internet. If you get denied, they'll send you 30 denial letters as well. So you can get that too. That's just Oregon we're talking here, but I'm sure that similar challenges were happening in other states as well.
Wow. Interesting.
Jeez. The state unemployment offices sound like a well-oiled machine because they named quite a few in here. So yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if it's an across-the-board thing. But yeah, to your point, Ty, yeah, that would certainly seem like a possibility if somehow you've managed to survive till now. Now, it was very interesting today. I heard a story that, you know, the other thing is the moratorium on that has come to an end. So there was a guy that they do a lot of haulaways for in my B&I group. They filled up 13 dumpsters the other day. So I guess these landlords, the minute they got a chance to start trying to, you know, excavate non-paying tenants with paying tenants, they didn't let the grass grow under their feet doing so. So I'm sure that's probably an article that we'll see and hear some more about, you know, down the road on this podcast. Charlie, do you have another article for us this week?
I do, but I just want to say I love your use of the word excavate there as though they were boulders.
Moving. I thought you would. I had to put a little poetry into it.
Oh, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. I love it. So, yeah, I found an article called in Reuters, you know, everyone's favorite news source, called Reddit seeks to hire advisors for U.S. IPO, sources say. And so apparently there are two sources who claim that, Reddit's trying to go public. It's, you know, for those who don't know, I'm sure everybody does at this point, but, you know, it's a social media site that has a bit of a more seedy upbringing than some of the more popular alternatives like Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. It's a website that enables communities to kind of talk to one another and has a lot of different niche kind of communities for different topics. And it started out very small, but of course has grown to the point where it's valued at 10 billion in a private fundraising round last month, and it hopes that it will be valued at more than 15 billion, according to a spokesperson. It's a San Francisco-based company. It just had two original founders, and they're still both involved in the company. It has 52 million daily active users and over 100,000 communities. And it does make a lot of its money on advertising. So the article talks a little bit about kind of what its revenue stream looks like. It reported about 100 million in advertising revenue in the second quarter. I think for me, the article missed out on the single biggest thing that I think makes Reddit a better alternative to some of the other ones. And so I just want to kind of shed some light on that. But one of the things that it does different is that it enables clients, developers to make apps and whatnot that enable you to use the site, but without going to the site. So instead of like going to Facebook and then scrolling your feed, you may have a developer who thinks it should look a certain way. And so he programs it to be, according to what your needs are. And it's one of the few sites that makes that really easy for others to do. And so that's, I think, one of the big parts that has helped it grow acceptance and interest. And I thought it was interesting because it talks about the advertising. I mean, one of the things that I personally use Reddit for is because with these apps, you can avoid the advertising completely. So there just isn't any, and you're just reading only content that's interesting to you. And so, I thought it was interesting, but I guess what my real question for you guys is, do you think that a site that maybe has a bit of a history that is not as mainstream because it has, had communities that are not always the best of topics, can then turn around and over a period of time become mainstream, go public, and really become a competitor to such ingrained competitors like Facebook and Instagram? Or is this an example of a company trying to grow past its natural kind of breaking point? And, maybe it's all a big mistake. I want to kind of get your guys' take on that. What do you think?
We've seen, you cited it, with companies like Facebook and so on, that these kind of social media and online networks, they can go public and they can still, be embroiled in controversy. And, because on the surface, I'd be like, well, geez, Reddit's going to go, they go public, that really brings a lot of public scrutiny and activism to their doorstep in a way that could really like stifle their ability to be outside the mainstream in some ways. And I think you will see some pressure like that, but seems like Facebook's been able, they've been able to keep doing their thing and deal with social pressures from different sides, although being public. So, I think, it. Yeah, I think there is room to be public and also not be mainstream. I mean, I wouldn't say Facebook's not mainstream, but I interpret your mainstream as also being, I'm interpreting it in the form of controversy, that the lack of being mainstream could be controversial and can't, and so I'm revising the question to, can you be controversial and go public? And yeah, I think we've seen some public media companies have been a little bit controversial lately.
Interesting article. So I guess I'll start off by saying this. I don't get Reddit at all. So, which I think that's a problem for Reddit because, like I'll go in there, I'll be searching something, it'll pop up, it'll say, do you want to continue in Safari or do you want to go to Reddit? It's like, no, I don't want to go to Reddit. So I don't even understand what they do. They have not, and not that I pay more attention to news cycles and these types of things than probably a lot of people. So the fact that, and I've never heard anybody say, boy, you got to get Reddit. It's the best source of information. So, that would be the challenge. I don't think they've had the exposure. And I guess, to go a little bit further, like you've talked about a negative history, I'm not really even aware of that. So if you say Reddit to me, I don't have a feeling one way or the other. And but I guess, if that reputation is out there, it's like any other company. There's been a lot of other companies that have had bad PR for any one of 1,000 different reasons, and they rehab their image and they come back stronger than ever. But, I would almost say with Reddit, everything I've said about it, the fact that I don't know a whole lot about it, they haven't really reached out or made it, a wow product, or you got to have this product, or inform the public of what they could do. Let's face it, there is, everybody probably does it. You go out there on Facebook and you see the same people night in and night out bashing Facebook, and they're evil and they're this, but there you are every night complaining about Facebook. So what have you done about it? So there, that's kind of the way I look at it. Everybody complains about Twitter, but what do they do? You're on the Twitter platform every night. So, there's always an opportunity for somebody, I think, to lure these people away. It's like everything else. If you don't take care of your customer, you don't treat them right, somebody else is going to. So, I would kind of look at it from that standpoint. If they've got the resources to do so, yeah, they've got the opportunity to definitely rehab if they have a negative image, and I think they definitely have an opportunity to start grabbing some clients from some of these other platforms that just aren't satisfied with what they're getting today.
I'm going to be a bit of a smartass here because I don't use Reddit either. But Jack, meet Charlie, because if you say you don't know somebody who refers to Reddit for their information sources and this and that all the time, you haven't been listening too much to Charlie lately, or ever actually. So.
Yep. I'm a fan. What can I say? It's one of the few places where you can actually get something that's interesting to you. So many times I'll go to Instagram, I try to read it, and you can search topics and whatnot, and there is some stuff on there that is interesting. But, for me, it's like if I want to watch a skateboarding clip, okay, then it's there. If I want to read tech reviews, then that's there. And, so for me, it's more about, I agree. The site sucks itself. The actual interface of the actual site is terrible, and I never use it. I only use apps that use it. And I think it's all just in what you use it for. But I think Ty's exactly right, because I've been pushing Reddit on Ty for God, who knows how long.
But your point is well taken, Jack, because that's 1 in 3 of us. So your point is still well taken.
But that's what's funny about it. He's a rabid Reddit fan. And I didn't really even realize that today. And we've been doing this podcast almost a year. So, as far as like getting that message out there, they're not doing a very good job. Charlie, they need to make you their spokesman. That's what they need to do. Get them on the map.
Trying every day.
So next week for you, Jack, have you heard of Discord?
I have. That's about all I've done is heard of it.
Have I talked about
Me
Discord?
too. Me too. At least I've clicked into Reddit before. I've never even tried to pull Discord up before. So
I do use Discord, and I think you guys are missing out on that one too, but we will leave it at that. We will leave it at that.
Charlie, you're going to drag us into the dark web or something. I don't know, man.
So I've got an article to wrap us up today, one that's near and dear to my heart. Lumber prices dropping. We've seen kind of lumber, we've been talking today about supply and demand issues in the labor market and chips and supply chains, and lumber prices dropping recently as we do this recording is yet another example of this. So the headline of the article is that it's dropped 74% since its all-time high in May. It's just dropped this week 74%. Now that's the wholesale price. So what it takes a while for that for various reasons, it could take a while for that to matriculate its way into retail, big box stores, or wherever else you might, as a consumer, get your lumber. And this article comes from our podcast producer, Ethan. And as he pointed out, looking at it, there's a lot of reasons why you might not see as a consumer this price drop immediately or ever if things were to change before it otherwise comes to fruition. The article suggested that you could see it in big box stores by the end of September if things didn't otherwise reverse. And so I liked this article just as a deal because I'm a big gardener, for those who don't know. And last year, before the lumber prices hiked, I think I got in and I got my kind of deck lumber to make a potting bench for my garden. And then every year, usually I get the cheapest lumber I can find for stakes for tomatoes and different garden projects, usually just things like fir stripping. And this year after the spike, I was just too cheap to do that. So I was scrounging every possible thing I could for stakes for my tomato plants. And, I'm growing over 130 tomato plants, right? So I need a lot of stakes. And, I had tomato plants that should have been on 6-foot stakes that were only on 3-foot stakes that I'm just doubling over because I was too cheap with the lumber increases to just get basic fir stripping. So I think, I'm looking at, should I go out, should I see if those prices do drop in the big box stores or where I can get lumber by the end of September? And if so, maybe go out and hoard me some lumber for next gardening season.
Can your stakes not be made of any material? I mean, it seems like something that would be maybe lend itself well to plastic or I don't know, something else maybe. But yeah, I think it's one of those central things that is so often used in everything that we do. And maybe we don't even realize how often wood becomes a side product of something that we're using. But I do think we're all going to notice, we already have, but I mean, as it continues to be high, I think we're all going to feel that one way or the other. And I think it'll be interesting to see how many intricate ways we can find as consumers to pay more due to the price of high lumber. I'm sure we'll find out.
It was interesting because I saw the blurb in the headline and it said that it's down 33% lower than summer of 2018. So I'm sitting there looking at this article going, geez, what's the why? Actually, I clicked on it, was able to get into the full article. And it really doesn't tell you why this is happening, that's the thing that I'm kind of looking at we're talking about every other commodity under the sun going in the opposite direction. I'd really love to know the why to how come why is lumber coming down? I don't know that anything has slowed down in the economy to justify that. So I'd really kind of like to know the why. What is this some kind of canary in a coal mine that we don't know about? Because it doesn't stand to reason that the price of lumber would be diving while all the other commodities we've been talking about on the show are going in the other direction.
Yeah, the article attributed it. It still leaves us with a why, but the article attributed it to the supply chain was getting cleaned up and things were normalizing but then it makes this statement while DIYers and people who would use lumber are not jumping back in and buying more. So, and I think that, so you're still left with well, why would that be, right? Why would it be that people aren't buying more? But it's basically the article's saying that the supply is going up because the supply chain was getting fixed, but the demand was not. There was no pent up demand. Like whatever demand was there just evaporated somehow. And I think that does leave us with a why as to why that would be.
Well, I think with the eviction moratorium going away, all the people who were spending their rent money on side projects are now no longer able to do that. And so, I think we've really covered a lot of bases here on the podcast, and that could be the reason.
Right. Yeah. People can't use their unemployment to buy lumber anymore. That's the problem.
Thank you for joining us on another week of None of Our Business's YouTube show and podcast. Missed last week. It was great to be back in the saddle this week with Ty, Ethan, and Charlie, the distinguished panel. Don't forget to check out our other show, Profitless on Purpose. Our sister show talks about all things nonprofit. We hope you enjoyed today's topics, today's cutting edge business issues as seen through the eyes of 3 accountants. Thank you for joining us. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell your peers about us. We'll catch you on the next broadcast. Have a great week, everybody.
Everyone.
Thanks, everybody.